Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. The pubs are still closed, but nevertheless, you will get your weekly fix of Chris Hamill and Patrick Van Straten. Boys, how are we, Christopher?
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you, mate. Although yesterday's football was a bit of a snooze fest, wasn't it? Wolves, oh my God. I mean, you watched Sheffield versus Manchester United, which is why your eye's probably still twitching. Sheffield United, I should say, otherwise I'll get stick in the comments. Leicester Everton, not much better.
Oh my God, honestly, I don't even want to get onto yesterday's game because I'd lose my head so badly. Pato, how are you?
I'm good. Arsenal are actually playing well for once. So, yeah, I don't have an issue with football right now. I'm doing pretty well. I wouldn't say I'm looking forward to us playing you on Saturday, but I think it'll be an interesting one.
Oh, definitely. I'm definitely not looking forward to us playing you on the weekend. That result yesterday is really like a big kick in the nuts for me, it has to be said. But let's crack on with the show because I'm not going to lie, almost every question this week was about Frank Lampard. It's been the biggest news of the week. It might be slightly old news, I guess you could say, by the time this video comes out. But nevertheless, I think we've been pretty objective about Lampard throughout the whole season. So it's time to give some opinions here. I want to know, and pretty much every Twitter question wanted to know, were Chelsea right or wrong to sack Frank Lampard? Hamill, let's come to you first.
I'm not sure if we've been objective throughout the season. We've definitely been objective in the week he was sacked, right? Because it wasn't really clear, at least in the first 12 hours, who was coming in and what actually got him the chop. But yeah, we've got a little bit more information now, haven't we? And ultimately, I think Lampard can probably be pleased, weirdly enough, that he leaves Chelsea with his reputation not completely in tatters. Like, people still remember that first season fondly when he sort of overperformed. At least the general football public thought he overperformed. Abramovich obviously wasn't that enthralled that they finished 33 points behind Liverpool, despite that transfer embargo. But that's a topic we might move on to in a little bit. Do I think Lampard deserved the sack? Ultimately, there's just been better coaches out there for a long time, right? Pochettino was available. Obviously, when Tuchel became available, he tried to kind of fend off Chelsea's interest until the summer, didn't he? After they went for Nagelsmann and Ranić, but I think the job was just perhaps too big for him. 12 months at Derby is not exactly a good training camp to take over one of the toughest managerial jobs in football. I mean, I think Jose Mourinho is the only Chelsea coach in the last, 20 years? Probably since Ranieri that's lasted past that second season. And there's been some coaches with unbelievable pedigree in there, hasn't there? Never mind just 12 months at Derby. So it was a very big ask. I don't blame him for taking the job. I think there was a bit of hubris on both sides. But Chelsea's thinking, I think, perhaps a little bit more erratic than Frank, thinking, I'm going to give this a good run, right? Because they gave him that 3-year contract. We know now that the third year was optional, so maybe the faith wasn't there from the get-go, but it also wasn't there after he delivered Champions League football, after he delivered an FA Cup final. So I think he was very much a stopgap. He maybe thought he was actually going to be given time to build something, going to be given time to grow into the role. And I think we all kind of succumbed to that narrative a little bit. At least I did, anyway. There was a bit of romanticism there, wasn't there? Club legend returns to club in time of need, given the transfer embargo, even though, like £100 million worth of players still came through the door. And sort of delivers on his promise or what was asked of him, and then it all comes undone after losing only winning 2 in the last 8. So yeah, good luck to Thomas Tuchel. 18-month contract. He probably is expected still to deliver Champions League football this term, and if he doesn't, maybe the pressure will catch up with him earlier than needs be. But ultimately he's a better manager, better pedigree. He did the hard yards at Mainz, didn't he? At Dortmund as well. So I think they're probably better placed to finish in the Champions League now, Joe, than under Lampard. Yes.
Okay. Pat, right or wrong?
Right or wrong? Like, I don't know if there really is a right or wrong. I mean, they're perfectly within their rights to do whatever they want with their club. I mean, what I want to push back a bit first is this idea that, like, an opinion means you're not being objective. Like, it kind of implies that our opinions are based on like our personal feelings, which I don't think is really true. Like, we've watched how they performed. Like, we were all perfectly content for like Frank Lampard to be a good manager. I think we were like perfectly willing to praise him when he finished in the top 4 last season. Like, certainly a lot of people on Football Daily have like praised him for his work with the young players. Like, coming to the conclusion that maybe Chelsea should have sacked him doesn't mean that you're not being objective. Sometimes that is the objective conclusion you have to arrive at. I think that Chris has really like got to the heart of it when he said there were better managers out there, because the reason that I'm not very sympathetic, firstly, I'm not that sympathetic because like, if you earn £6 million for doing a year and a half's work, then maybe shut up. But it's that when Tammy Abraham last year had his first season starting as centre forward for Chelsea as a very young player. What was he, 22? And he got, I think it was 15 or 16 league goals in the end, and had a really promising season. Like, yes, there was some inconsistency, but there was enough there to show that he could be a great top level striker. But Chelsea went out in the summer and said, you know what? Tammy Abraham is good, but we think Timo Werner can be better. We're going to go and get Timo Werner because even though Tammy is good, he's an upgrade on what we have. And Frank Lampard didn't complain about that. In fact, he was kind of like, this is what Chelsea should do. We should go and like get the best players in the world. Well, if you're going to apply that philosophy to players, I think you also have to apply it to managers and say, okay, well, we're not saying this manager is bad, but if there's somebody out there who's better, then we should go and get that person. That's the Chelsea way. I mean, to me, the biggest mistake they made here is that they should have, if they were going to get rid of Frank, if they knew this was on the cards, then they, I think, should have gone and got Pochettino, who I think would have been a better fit. And as much as I like Tuchel, and I do think Pochettino is better. And so that's why I find all these stories coming out now to be spurious at best, because whenever a manager gets sacked, you always get these stories afterwards that are like, this is why it was inevitable. In the same way that when Arsenal started winning games, people are like, well, you know, this was inevitable for X or Y reason. Almost nothing is inevitable in football. And if Chelsea knew that they were thinking about this months ago, I think they'd have targeted Pochettino. So actually, I don't really believe all that stuff. I just think that it's easy to say the negative stuff about a manager once he's been sacked. On the other hand, it sounds like there was some stuff going on behind the scenes, which was, I don't know, maybe not optimal. I've been very clear that I really, really didn't like the way that he constantly blamed players for things that were going wrong, and I'm sure that he did at some point, but I'm struggling to remember any instance of him taking any responsibility after a result, instead of just saying, you know, the players know what they need to do it better, blah blah blah. Which I think is sometimes maybe the downside of hiring somebody as a coach who was an incredible player, that they just kind of think, why can't you just hit like a 60-yard pass onto like the toe of the striker? That's what I'd have done. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not that sympathetic, to be honest. I think that he might well go on to have like a perfectly decent managerial career. And I don't think Chelsea are saying that he won't by getting rid of him now. But I completely agree with Chris that ultimately they're taking gambles and they're saying, you know what, our gamble has a higher chance of coming in with Tuchel as manager than with Lampard. So I think that it's a sensible move in that regard. I just think that they should maybe have done it a bit sooner or not hired Lampard in the first place.
I think that's my issue with it. I think if you hire Frank Lampard in the first place, you're accepting, or you're at least attempting to change the long-standing philosophy of constant rotation within Chelsea managers, right? I think by hiring a manager who has no experience but is a club legend, you're almost saying, okay, we're no longer going to go on the merry-go-round of managers, change every 12 months. We want to develop with Frank Lampard and try and give him plenty of time and support him when he needs support, which was never going to work for Chelsea if they're going to continue with the mentality of 12 bad weeks and you get sacked. And that's what's happened, isn't it? And rightly or wrongly, Frank's out of a job. So I think the biggest problem potentially is 18 months ago, whenever Frank originally got that contract, that they should never have hired him in the first place if they weren't going to back him through very difficult moments. And Roman Abramovich must have known that when he put that contract on the table, that Frank Lampard was going to have those difficult moments, because he's not the finished product as a coach. He's, like Chris said, quite a long way off some of the other coaches that are available in like world management. So if you weren't going to back him, then you should have just hired, I don't know, Allegri or whoever was available at that time in the first place. I think that was a bit of a weird one. I also have sympathy with the Chelsea fans who are like, oh, you know what, I didn't want him going at this moment. We should have seen it through to the end of the season, which I think is most Chelsea fans' opinions. I haven't actually spoken to a Chelsea fan yet that wanted Lampard out, which is quite an interesting one because it's rare that happens when there's a sacking. Usually when there's a sacking, the club's fans are like, okay, yeah, we kind of agree with it. Like, it's rare that they don't agree with the removal of a manager. And I feel like in general, Chelsea fans don't agree with this decision. So if Tuchel now doesn't get top 4, I think Chelsea fans will be even more up in arms with the board. So I actually think there's quite a bit of pressure on Thomas Tuchel for this second half of the season, because what Chelsea fans will say come May, if they finish 6th or 7th, is, well, Frank would have finished 7th or 8th. So what was the point in sacking it? That is probably Chelsea fans' mindset. So I feel a little bit sorry for Frank, but if you took your hat off of him being a club legend and all of that I've just said, and you just did it purely on results over the last 12 weeks, there is an argument to be made he should have been sacked. So
I think you made a couple of interesting points there. The first being, like, why didn't they appoint someone of Allegri's standing to start with? And it's actually easy to forget that when Maurizio Sarri left Chelsea for Juventus, and there was a lot of rancour there, wasn't there? Chelsea fans just wanted him out indefinitely without seeing, who was on the horizon. There wasn't that many top-level options who could step into the job. I think Allegri had actually announced he wanted to take a year out of football to learn English. He'd only just finished his all-conquering spell with Juventus, hadn't he? And I, for a script, remember looking at the odds the week before Frank Lampard was appointed, and Rafa Benitez was the second favourite at 9-1. A guy that had obviously led them to the Europa League, but was really not liked by the Chelsea fan base. I think he won some of them over eventually, but I remember there being a lot of ag when he was first employed. It was in similar conditions to now, right? Finishing a season off. Yeah, and then I think the second, what was the second point you made? Perhaps just about, that's it. The Chelsea fans not really wanting Lampard out en masse, right? And I think it's because the league table is still quite forgiving at this point for underperforming big sides. Like, they're only, at least before the game against Wolves, were 5 points behind Liverpool, right? So the situation doesn't feel like insurmountable. You know, it feels like similar to last season. You know, they're chasing the whole time. Maybe Abramovich just felt after a £220 million spend, they shouldn't be relying on the league table being that forgiving again, right? Like, if Manchester City and Liverpool had their houses in order a bit more, and we know that Manchester City are coming to the fore, Liverpool's form has been a little bit bizarre, hasn't it? That they have suffered some really bad luck in terms of conversions, but then it would look a little bit more emphatic again, and maybe it'd be easy to say, look, we've made no progress here, but instead
I think that
they're in that grey area still, aren't they?
The £220 million is effectively what's got Lampard the chop, in my opinion. Like,
because his ability couldn't keep up. His ability couldn't keep up with Abramovich's ambition, and I don't know who's in the wrong there. Is Abramovich's ambition disproportionate, or should Lampard have improved quicker? Like, what do you think?
It's a bit of both, isn't it? It's a bit of both. Like, it's all well and good giving him these players, but if he's not ready to take hold of those players, it's almost like a little bit of a waste of money in some regards, isn't it? And he probably should be. What people will say is, well, he should be ready to take hold of those players if he's Chelsea coach. But again, we could have all told you probably 18 months ago he wasn't going to get to that level this quickly. So they should have foreseen this. Yeah. It's pretty poor planning, in my opinion, from Chelsea. I don't know
if that's true. Like, I mean, like, he could definitely have been a bit better than this, and that would have been all right. Like, I mean, like, given how topsy-turvy the table is, it's taken actually, like, some pretty horrific performances for Chelsea to be in this position. Like, and I don't know, I mean,
But you could have foreseen that there was going to be like big blips like this, right? When he first took over, he was never going to be clean sailing the whole way through.
Yeah, but it's never clean sailing for anyone. Like, the question is whether you see that he's building something under the surface. And I actually think the kind of opposite is true. I had a much clearer sense of what Chelsea were going to be and how Chelsea were going to play last season than I do this season. Because I think that the problem with Frank, one of his problems, has been his inability to accurately analyse what's going wrong. So Frank immediately came in and said, we're going to play this extremely energetic, high-pressing style, high possession. We're going to win the ball back high up the pitch and immediately transition and try and score goals quickly. It's quite a German style. And then when things started to go wrong, he'd immediately change everything round. You know, he'd start like moving around different formations. Like this season, he's chopped and changed the front line endlessly. I was watching some game the other day. What was the game before Wolves for Chelsea?
It was in the cup, wasn't it?
What, Luton?
They played Luton in the
cup. They lost to Leicester before Luton.
The Leicester game. Yeah. That was the one. I was watching that game and I remember the commentators were saying like, oh, it's been really hard for Frank because there's been no consistency in the lineup. And I was like, do these people know who picks the lineup? Like, if he just said, this is going to be our starting team, pretty much, we're going to stick to it. We're going to develop some relationships between these players and we're going to play my style. I actually think that even if they weren't better off with results, I think that they would he'd have at least been able to point at it and said, we are building something. We're creating a style. We're building a first team. And it's going to take a while to do that. But because he seems to be like changing formation, like flailing around with personnel, it just feels a little bit like he's got nothing to hang his hat on. He's got nothing there that he can say, this is the thing that I'm doing. And just having that, you know, that argument of like, this is what I'm doing is really, really important. Like,
but do you think that's because
Chelsea made that
players?
Pardon?
That are in the. Do you think that's because he was like? Do you think that in his ideal 11, let's say he followed what you just said there and put out a very similar 11 every week? I think players like Havertz don't get in it, and I think that the pressure from above for not playing the £72 million asset they gave him in the summer will have been immense.
I don't know. I mean, you could make that same argument about Kepa, but the club went and spent plenty of money to get him in a replacement keeper. Like, I agree that they might say we want to see Havertz, but Chelsea have cup games. They have cup games, and it doesn't. You don't have to run out exactly the same lineup every week, but you can change one part of it. So you can play Havertz sometimes instead of Mount, rather than saying, okay, we're going to completely switch around the front line. That's my issue. Like, constantly chopping and changing. You're trying to problem solve, and actually I don't think there was a great problem originally with how Frank Lampard was trying to do things. But once he decided that there was, when they got a couple of bad results, he started making a rod for his own back by creating an inconsistent side where nobody knew where they stood. Nobody had a chance to develop any relationships, which are extremely important in attack. So I think that, yeah, he kind of went away from his principle there. And there are managers who have like an ideology and they stick to it come what may. And there are managers who solve problems, you know, who find ways to work around issues. And Frank Lampard was an ideologue who by the end was trying to behave like a problem solver. And that ultimately is what gets you in trouble, because you just don't have anything then if the results aren't there. You don't have anything to point to and say, this is what I'm trying to do with the club. And I think that was a real issue by the end.
I think Abramovich also expected him to be a bit of a company man. Coming in, you know, as such a, you know, almost a rookie, almost a novice. And I think pretty much after maybe the first window or at least approaching the 2020 window, stuff has come out from behind the scenes, right, that they had very different ideas around recruitment. You know, there's agents saying that out of the 6 that came in of the summer that was kind of universally praised, only Ben Chilwell was really Frank Lampard's idea, and that he wanted to pursue Declan Rice and that he wanted to pursue James Tarkowski. And I mean, they would have cost, you know, the same amount as probably, you know, Havertz. Maybe not as much as Havertz, but maybe as much as Werner, right? I think they've both been quoted to be £50 million players in the past by their respective clubs. So I
reckon Rice would have been about Havertz money. Like, people talking about him as being £70 million plus, aren't they?
So it is interesting that I think his maybe his unwillingness to fall in line in that regard, and I'm not saying that, you know, I mean, I'd probably side with Marina Granovskaya in terms of like Declan Rice and Tarkowski over, you know, Werner and whoever else came in. That was more her idea.
Yeah.
So it's not really about that, but it is interesting to see and to hear that there was maybe some more friction behind the scenes than we anticipated, and that might have been, you know, what brought it forward a little bit as well, because he was cutting quite a aggressive figure in his post-match conferences.
Oh my god!
And it wasn't
embarrassing.
It couldn't. Maybe it can't all be, you know, put down to the level of performance from the players. Maybe there was just things. Like I said, Chelsea's infamously a political club, right? And by the end, you know, we had like the technical / performance director, Petr Cech, pretty much training with the squad. So, you know, the board had eyes in the camp. He must have felt maybe a little bit not trusted.
It's an interesting one though, isn't it? Because now they've brought in Tuchel, right, who is notoriously like very combative, I'll put it politely, with like board members and with the people above him and with the club. Like, so you're now putting a very volatile situation under an even bigger microscope, I think. So, like, Thomas Tuchel, I really think that's a good appointment. I really do think it's a good appointment. That I genuinely believe this is the third best squad in the league. I think it's the best young squad in the league. I think Man City and Liverpool are at a more advanced stage of their development, but I think in terms of youth and sort of 20 to 24-year-olds, you can't get better than this Chelsea squad. So Tuchel is walking into what is almost like a dream scenario. He's even got his PSG captain at the back. He speaks all of the languages fluently that the squad speak. This should be like Tuchel's wet dream, in my opinion. So, like, where do you think he needs to finish, I guess, is the question, for it to be a success in the next 4 months?
I guess Pat can answer that. I was just going to come in with it. It is an interesting point you made that he doesn't really suffer fools. I remember the whole Vatska thing at Dortmund, right? He got sacked 3 days after winning the DFB Pokal in his second season. And I think that was a season where, they'd push Bayern, maybe not push him the whole way, but they'd also lost a cup final to Bayern the season before. So, he was being pretty consistent at Dortmund, wasn't he, from the get-go after that move from Mainz? And, you know, had blooded some really interesting young players into the side. Rafa Guerreiro had become a midfielder. He'd brought Dembele into the side. I think there's a £120 million spend after losing Gundogan, Hummels, Mkhitaryan. So, in a very short space at Dortmund, he obviously won a trophy, turned over a squad, reinvented some players, and these all sounded him out as a really top coach. But yeah, he fell out with the board, didn't he? And I remember, actually, it was when the bus was attacked, right? And then Vatska agreed to play Monaco in the Champions League the day after. And Tuchel was like, what the and then at PSG, when he fell out with Leonardo, it was because he wanted a centre-half, and they bought him Danilo Pereira, who he then played centre-half almost as like a protest thing. So, actually, when he's fallen out with the board, at least, you know, from the information I've garnered, it's not even been that unreasonable. So I'm kind of inclined to take his side. So maybe if the Chelsea board don't give him a reason, Marina's obviously very, very good at her job, isn't she? Then maybe that there won't be a lot of smoke to contend with. But yeah, Pat, what does success look like for Tuchel now then?
Well, you'd be inclined to think that it's top four, but I mean, it's really hard to say because of where they are right now. Like, I mean, if Tuchel drastically improves the side, gives them a real style, can show progress, then I think he'll keep his job, you know, because he'll be.
Oh yeah, they think we're going to get sacked.
He'll say, "Well, look where you were when I took over, and look at the state of the league." Like, I mean, there's very little I can do about that. So from that point of view, I don't think expectations are that bad. The only weird thing about that is that Chelsea did decide to bring him in mid-season, because I don't think Tuchel was going to get snapped up by anyone else before the end of the year, and I think that anybody who came in for him in the summer, Chelsea could easily compete with. So it almost does feel like they were hoping this would turn their season around and get them top four. But then again, I guess if they were thinking we were going to sack Frank anyway, then they might as well get a manager in and see if he can get them top four, which would be pretty good. I mean, when it comes to like dealings with the board, Chelsea just don't care. You know, it doesn't matter, right? Like, if Tuchel comes in and he improves the side and in 18 months he's completely burned all his bridges and they have to fire him, they don't mind because they're Chelsea. And they'll go out and find somebody else. They'll go and try and get Nagelsmann or something. And they'll be absolutely fine, again, because this is what they do. And the consistency at the club is not a product of the manager. It's a product of Marina Gradovskaya and the backroom staff, right? So yeah, I don't know. Success to me looks like having a clear imprint of how they want to play, starting to get the best out of their forwards, whichever particular collection of forwards that'll be. I think they will probably streamline the squad at some stage. Like,
yeah, there's like a squad of 27, right?
Yeah, we'll get an idea of who his guys are going to be in attack, and I do think that probably, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I do think that probably maybe Tammy will be a casualty of that. I think somebody will get a bargain out of at least one of Chelsea's forwards over the next couple of seasons, because they'll move somebody on, and somebody will get Mason Mount at a knockdown rate, or somebody will be able to get Abraham off them for like 40 mil. Like, I don't know. I think that's quite interesting. The interesting thing actually though about squad building is I understand why they went and bought Havertz in the summer, and I think that was a good signing, and I think that Frank not getting who he wanted is not remotely a defence for how badly he was doing with this squad. But if he wanted to spend 70 mil on Declan Rice in the summer instead of Havertz, I actually do think that would have been the more sensible decision for this team right now. I think that what this team needs right now is that sort of midfielder much more than another in-betweener attacker. It would really not surprise me if Thomas Tuchel gets to the summer and he says, you know what I need? I really need like a sort of young ground-eating midfielder who can maybe step into the back line as well. And Chelsea are like, oh, we're actually going to have to go and try and buy Declan Rice anyway. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that that's what they need to do in the summer. What they need to do in the short term is figure out how they want to play. And I think that'll be fine. I think we might have a few weeks where Chelsea are a little bit boring, maybe trying to figure out their possession style, trying to work out the positional play that Tuchel likes, because it is notoriously demanding and complicated. But once they nail that, I think they'll just start to roll teams over, because every Tuchel team is amazing at creating huge chances. And by this point next year, I think they could actually be a really impressive outfit, and I think you'd expect them to be in a clear top three in the Premier League along with Liverpool and City.
I mean, I do think it's just worth saying, like, this is a guy who finished 7th with Mainz, or he definitely qualified for Europa League football, didn't he? And he managed to get like 15 league goals out of Shinji Okazaki. Like, his pedigree.
And Schürrle.
His pedigree is better than Chelsea fans are currently giving him credit for. I think they can afford themselves a little bit more excitability, let's say, at getting someone like Tuchel. I don't understand how his reputation isn't quite up there in the Premier League, and it's mainly because, you know, I suppose not a lot of people are going to go out their way to relive his years at Mainz, or even his first year at Dortmund after he took over from Jurgen Klopp. But like he reinvented a Jurgen Klopp Dortmund side, you know, like quickly as well. And I think at PSG, he holds the record for like most successive wins, highest win percentage in Ligue 1. At most clubs he's been at, he could not have done a better job. so I do think like he's a bloody good candidate for this.
And also at PSG, I mean, people always think like, oh, PSG spend tons and tons of money, but actually the last couple of seasons, the seasons that Tuchel's been there, their investment has really dropped off, right?
They made a profit one year.
Yeah, you hinted at it earlier with the Danilo Pereira loan signing. Like, that is the sort of stuff they've done over the last couple of years. Yes, they spent huge money on Icardi, but it's Icardi. It's not like when they went and got Neymar and Mbappe. So, yeah, I think he's an excellent coach. I think he's really good in one-on-one matchups, and he's obviously worked with Pulisic before as well. Like, I think that I'd be really excited about what he could do with guys like Hudson-Odoi and Pulisic, because I think those guys could. I mean, Hudson-Odoi in particular, I think is quite. I think he's a really special talent. I really want to see him under an elite coach.
Yeah, he took the words out of my mouth.
Tuchel is that
because he was just straight away he was talking about the directness of Hudson-Odoi, and like it did kind of evoke, you know, him putting his trust in Ousmane Dembele, for example, at Dortmund. And against Wolves, I think like him and Ziyech were the standout players. But that's a massive vote of confidence, isn't it, to play Hudson-Odoi out of position in his first game?
Yeah, I think he is going to be fiddling around with that squad, though, quite a bit over the next few weeks. Like, I can't see him sticking necessarily with that back three, with Aspi on the right of it, and I'm not sure about like Pulisic coming on as a wing back. And as much as he become a meme under Frank Lampard and over the last few days has taken a battering from some sets of fans, I still think Mason Mount is going to be absolutely vital to how Tuchel plays in the second half of the season. I just think he's been the best player for Chelsea this year. Even when he came on, I thought he was immediately like the brightest spark on the pitch. Like turned two players, got in behind.
I agree to an extent because he's like a better passer, I think, than Kovacic or Jorginho. Well, he's a more progressive passer. Obviously, Jorginho's got that like 80 passes a game with 90% completion rate down to a T because not a lot of them are very ambitious. So I do think they need him in the side for that because Kante doesn't really have that like an amazing ability to play through the lines either, does he? But from what I've seen of like Tuchel's teams in the past, he's kind of tended to play with a midfield three. One of them's a defensive midfielder who often slots into the back line to make a back three so the wing backs can push forward. One of them's like a box-to-box guy, and then one of them joins the attack. So I feel like Ziyech can probably do that as well. So I honestly don't know if like Mount's nailed on to start that many games, like looking at his systems in the past. But it would be a shame for Mount's progress to like halt here.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because there's just so many options in there, like where he plays Havertz, how he plays Werner, Pulisic, Ziyech, Hudson-Odoi, Tammy. Like, he's like brimming with players. Too many players, some would say. Should we move on, though, to do some quick-fire questions because we're rambling a little bit. Let's go to Zora, Wars and who says, where can Leicester upgrade to become perennial Champions League chasers? Pat?
Well, firstly, I think the name is Zorowar Sandu, but I did enjoy your read. I did enjoy your reading of it. It was like interpretive poetry. Where can Leicester upgrade? Well, I mean, everyone's been saying it forever. They definitely need another striker who can take some of the burden off Jamie Vardy and give them that cutting edge up front. Where else?
Right wing instead of Albrighton.
Yeah, and I mean some depth, like a right winger who's also creative, would be really good. Like basically what they want is a Mahrez type or a Ziyech type. Like that would be really, really good for them. They've tried a few things there. Albrighton's played there, Perez has played there. They've got Cengiz Under, who is like doesn't look like it'll be made permanent. I think it's just a loan with an option, right? So yeah, I mean those are the obvious places for me. I mean, they've had a bit of a difficult season though. Like Ndidi obviously was out for a long time, was playing centre back for a long time. Soyuncu's been out, Pereira's been out, which will help a lot with that creativity on the right wing. Tielemans has had a bit of a static season, hasn't really taken the step forward they'd want. So maybe they'd also like a little bit more depth. I
think
in
he's
midfield.
started to do that in recent weeks, actually.
Yeah, but I still think he's not been as good this year as he was like when he first arrived at Leicester. I think that he's had a little bit of a stagnant year, and he's still fine, but getting in another guy there so you can rotate him out when he's in trouble, because that's the real thing. Like Leicester's depth, right? Like Leicester just do not have the depth of a lot of the teams around them, and they found some interesting parts in the process. Like because they've lost some guys, they've found that like James Justin is a perfectly like useful Premier League player. But I think like having a little bit more depth all the way around the squad is going to be a thing. They're also going to have to think at some point about a new keeper. Like for now, Schmeichel's great, but he's also at the age where keepers suddenly go from being really good to being genuinely terrible overnight. Because I think he's 34, 35 now. So that's something they might want to have an eye on too. But generally speaking, they've got a robust system. They know that what they want to do. And actually, I was thinking yesterday, everyone agrees that Johnny Evans is great. Last season, everyone said Soyuncu was one of the best centre-backs in the league. This year, everyone's going on about how Wesley Fofana is one of the best centre-backs in the league. Maybe everyone should just acknowledge that like Brendan Rodgers is a good defensive coach and is really good at creating a solid system that makes everybody look good. Like, I'm not saying those guys aren't good, but to me, when you think that all their centre-backs are good, it's probably quite likely that actually the manager and the defensive midfield is good. And I think those things are clearly the case at Leicester.
Yeah, I think in order to become a perennial Champions League chaser, for me, I don't even know whether it is necessarily signings. I think it's potentially keeping. I think in order to hit that next level, what Leicester have to be able to do is to say, and I think they've definitely done with James Maddison, is to be able to say, when Manchester City come in for your player at £60 million, we're not selling him. I think they've done it with Maddison, and I think the same might happen with Brendan Rodgers. You know, when a top level elite side, if they come in for Brendan Rodgers and Brendan says, no, I'm sticking with Leicester, and they say, no, we're not selling Wilfred Ndidi, no, we're not selling whoever the next player is for Fafana or whatever, then that's when I think they can start hitting that perennial Champions League chasers, because I don't think it is necessarily sustainable in the Premier League at least. I think it's more sustainable in other European leagues to continually sell one of your elite players every summer to a rival and be a Champions League chaser every single year. I just think they need to stick it a little bit more. But it's hard to do, isn't it? It's easier said than done.
And it depends on the money versus player as well, right? Like, I mean, if somebody comes in for Maddison for like an absolutely obscene sum of money, then I think you can definitely sell him and still move on as a club, still be better. Like, imagine if somebody came in and paid them like 70 mil for Maddison. Then I think they could say, you know what, we're going to go and get Buendia for the right wing, and we've got a really interesting idea for attacking midfield, and they'd be fine. I mean, the question is like whether they can attract players to me more than whether they can keep players.
Yeah, and I don't think it's ever been easier for Leicester, one, to retain players, and two, to attract that calibre of player, given the profile of their manager. Like, things like moving to the new cutting edge training facilities do help when you're selling a dream, and I think Brendan Rodgers is very good at selling a dream to his players. You hear it in James Maddison in the post-match interview. Like, I'm sure he would much rather play number 10 now and be Brendan Rodgers' go-to guy in a bid to secure Champions League football than be a squad player at City or Liverpool, because I think they're the only clubs that, you know, if they came in for a Leicester player at current, I think you'd have a really hard time retaining the player. Given the dynamic of the league now, right? It was a little bit different. We saw with Ben Chilwell at the start of the season. He thought he was going to a bigger club, potentially one with a higher ceiling, but it'd be easy for Rodgers to point to that and say, look, that is not the case. And I did say that at the start of the season. And Chilwell was also a great instance of, like, here's a good player, but an entirely replaceable player that we've got a better fee for than we should have. And James Justin has slotted in, and I actually think their standing in Premier League football should be very equal right now. So I think it is, like, if they can continue to dig out, if they can sign 2 or 3 more clever players for between the 30 and 40 million mark, which they have been good at for the last 2 to 3 years, I think that'll put them in really good stead. But it was a little bit worrying that there was no murmurs of forward cover in January, because Vardy's just had a hernia operation and he's 34, and Perez is a huge downgrade up front.
All right, let's do the next one then. This is from, I want to get this one right, Wintry Alley. Is that correct? I don't know. Or is it Wintry Alley? I don't know. He says, do you need to play attacking football in order to be classed as successful, e.g. Potter versus Bruce?
No, I don't think so. I think Jose Mourinho is, although some of his sides have played much better football, like his Inter Milan and Madrid sides, than sort of people give him credit for, or football Twitter likes to give him credit for. Like, he's a good instance of just playing, functional, pragmatic football. Nuno Espirito Santo has obviously enjoyed great success until this season, deploying that style of football. But I think it maybe goes back to what Pat was saying earlier with Lampard. It's certainly easy if you've got a clear dream to sell to navigate those tumultuous waters, right? So that's where I would say it helps.
I think you need to be successful to be classed successful. Like, I mean, I don't really know what this question is asking. It's like, you might need to play attacking football to get neutrals to love you, if that makes sense. But no, I mean, like, Allegri was successful, Simeone is successful, Marcelino is successful. There are plenty of defensive coaches around who are pretty successful. I'd actually say that Brendan Rodgers, like, his instincts have been defensive everywhere he's been, except at Liverpool, where he knew he didn't have the talent to play like the way he wants to play. That's fine. Like, it's being conservative doesn't necessarily mean being boring. So I don't know. I think that if you play defensive football and it's not working, it's much easier to lose people's approval. You know, if you're playing defensive football, like this is why Mourinho often burns out at clubs, because when he is playing defensive football, or he's perceived as playing defensive football, and then not getting the results, then he's got nothing left. Whereas if you're playing really fun attacking football, then even when the results aren't there, people say, you know what, like I love watching my side play, and that counts for a lot. So no, I just think you need to be clear about what you're doing, and if I was a defensive coach, I'd just make it really abundantly clear that like this is how we're going to set up, or this is how we're going to set up with the players. Because also, I mean, you know, people are saying, oh well, Steve Bruce like gets a tough ride because he's like, you know, quite a defensive coach. Well, Benitez is quite a defensive coach, and he didn't get a tough ride at Newcastle. Everyone agreed that he did an amazing job. So it's really about how well you do with that system. But if it doesn't go well, I'd say you're a little bit more vulnerable if you're a defensive guy.
Yeah, definitely, especially amongst your own fans, I think. Like, if you're playing boring football week in, week out and not getting results, like you just said, then your own fans turn way quicker than if you're playing, like, high-octane attacking football. And that's exactly what's happened with, like, the Steve Bruce Potter argument. Potter's not picking up results, but at least the fans are being entertained week on week.
But they're now at the
Bruce
extreme end of
picking
that,
up
whereas,
results.
like centre forwards are missing. Like they are going to cost Potter his job if they continue to miss shots from 8 yards out. Like they're now almost going beyond that.
Yeah, but like Bruce is now not getting results and also playing the worst football in the league. So it's like you can see why that's fallen apart very quickly. Let's do one more then before we do a personal question. Where should Danny Ings go if he doesn't sign a contract at Southampton? That's from McGreaves. Pat, where would you go if you were Danny?
Is his contract actually up this summer, or does he have a year left on it?
2022, so he's got 18 months left on his contract.
I don't know. It depends how much money he'd cost, man. Like, I like Danny Ings, but like he's not young, and while he's been fit at Southampton mostly, he has still had injury problems. So I don't trust his body.
He's only 28 though. He's only 28, so he's not.
Yeah, but I mean, he's going to cost still a lot. I mean, the obvious pace is like people have talked about Spurs. I suppose you could think about Leicester, though he's a very different sort of striker. I mean, I could imagine Leicester, but I don't know. If he's going to cost like 30 mil or whatever, I don't think I'd do it. But yeah, he should certainly angle for a side competing for the Champions League. Like, he's that level of player when he's fit. I think he's a fantastic player. Like, it always amazes me every week when people try and talk about Southampton having a good squad, and it's like Southampton have absolutely nothing except a couple of great forwards. Like, and I think Diallo is quite promising, but Che Adams and Danny Ings basically do everything for that side.
And Stuart Armstrong, come on, put some respect on one of the best lids in football.
He was amazing. Yeah, he was amazing against Arsenal. Armstrong.
Yeah, and yet didn't really couldn't really do much. He was just running down the wing by the end. I mean, this is the thing. That squad is god awful. But Ings is fantastic.
Do you know where I saw him linked with the other day, and I thought would be hilarious, and also would be actually quite good? Atletico Madrid.
Jesus Christ!
What?
Yeah, somebody linked into Atletico Madrid, and I was like, do you know what? Like, it wouldn't happen, but I could totally imagine him doing a fantastic job for Atletico Madrid as like Luis Suarez's rotation man.
Mate, I can see it now.
Because they're a better version, aren't they? And Southampton,
like an Instagram story, him and Trippier in the Havanas, like in their vests, just pulling up on actually Madrid doesn't have any beaches, does it? But enjoying a nice cerveza. What a scene. I was going to say Leicester as well. It's but only for the right money. Like, I don't think Leicester would overpay for him because they're run too intelligently. So I mean, how much do you think it would cost to get Danny Ings out with a year left on his contract? Like, his significance to Southampton is still pretty substantial, isn't it?
Like 40 mil plus, I think.
Yeah, you still have to pay a disproportionate amount, don't you? So I think maybe like if they don't improve the squad, or if they don't want to spend, they might be willing just to run down his contract, or hope he signs a new one. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he didn't sign a new one, to be honest with you. Feels like a little bit of haggling manoeuvre, doesn't it, to get a better deal. Let's do a personal question then. This one from Carabini10, who says, what dishes are ketchup acceptable on? What dishes is ketchup acceptable on, I think it's meant to be.
Yes, thank you.
And there's not many answers here, is there?
No. No, it's very limited.
Is there?
That's very limited.
What wouldn't you put it on? Fish, for starters. That's
No, well, yeah, but you would have it on fish and chips. I would
Yeah,
say
battered
ketchup's
fish.
acceptable on fish and chips.
yeah. Yeah, you would have it with fish and chips, battered fish, and you would have it on a fish finger sandwich as well. I was more thinking like, I don't know, in my head then. I don't know why I had like yellow fish in my head.
Well, like smoked.
I don't think there's.
Yeah.
Ooh. Ooh,
I
yeah,
don't think there's an awful lot of other ones other than chip-related dishes.
Yes, I completely agree. I'm so glad that you guys are like. I firmly agree with this. Like when people put ketchup on like on eggs or something, I find that absolutely deranged. Like,
Oh, wait. Well,
it's
mate,
so
colour-
gross
on
to
a
me.
fry up,
Mate,
though.
colour
on a
me-
fry up.
Colour
come
me
on.
deranged then, because I will put it on 75% of things.
Oh no! When people put it on eggs, like on a fry up, I have it there, but I don't have it for the eggs. Like I have it for like the sausages or whatever. Like, and when people have beans and
Bacon.
ketchup, I think that's fucking weird.
Here's one you
I
might.
have
Here's
beans
one you
and
might not
ketchup.
like.
I have beans ketchup.
I would have it on like a cottage or a shepherd's pie.
No, that's. My wife does that
No,
as well. My wife does that as
Oh,
well.
hang
and
on,
I, think it's
I do that.
Mad.
I do that.
Yeah,
I do that.
Love that.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll particularly
great.
do it if it's a micro, like if you've frozen half of it and then you unfreeze it and then you microwave it the next day. I'll put a fair old wedge of tomato ketchup on there. It has to be said.
Yeah, on a jacket potato, just because you know when you get past the
God.
first layer of jacket
Can't eat
potato
those
that's
things,
got
man. I
the
can't eat those things.
it's got the beans, it's got the cheese on. You think jacket potatoes are?
Yeah, jacket potatoes
Yeah,
are
jacket
weird,
potatoes.
man. It's just like is it the depression where I'm just getting like a potato to eat? Like it's so a jacket potato is such a weird, demoralising food.
I think jacket potato, cheese and beans is
yeah.
ultimate comfort food.
Oh, it's
No, mate.
Crap.
Honestly, that is like something that like they're handing out in like the deepest, darkest corner of Russia, and they had
Yeah.
no other food left.
Yeah, it's like-
gulag food.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the gulag.
Yeah, you like wrap it. You have to carry it home like wrapped in a sock, and then everyone like gathers round it for warmth, and then eventually you eat it. Like it's so no, man. Like I just don't.
You're
I'm
wrong.
Like, this
I
is
was thinking of
just
Siberia. I was thinking of like a Siberian prison. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, dust bowl.
Not just
Dust bowl
not
food.
didn't just generalize Russia. There,
I mean,
by
it
the way.
is-
I didn't mean to do that.
It is survival food, for sure. But like, no, I think you can elevate the basic, jacket potato to something else.
You can make it better for sure. Like I mean, cheese on a potato is never going to be bad, but like as a general rule, foods that arose from poverty are the best foods, right? Like bread, dumplings, like stews, all that stuff, like pies, all that stuff is really, really good.
Except
Jacket
potatoes,
potato-
you turncoat.
Well, no, jacket potatoes. Obviously, potatoes are great, but like the worst kind of potato is like a new potato, like a boiled
I
potato.
love a new potato as well, but I do put
And
a heart.
Cough,
I put a heart-stopping
Cough.
amount of butter on everything, though. I think that probably counts
How
for
is that-
something.
If you don't think that a new potato is the worst kind of potato, Joe?
It's all right. It's fine. I don't think it needs.
No, but what's
disrespect.
but what's the worst kind of potato? Like, because it clearly is a boiled new
No,
potato.
it's a jacket. It's a jacket potato.
No, a jacket is better than a boiled potato.
No,
What a
no, because
debate.
a boiled potato you can have in a potato salad, and potato salad is exceptional.
Potato salad
potato
is pretty
sa-
good, but like that.
A
but there I
potato
feel
salad
like you're
trumps anything that can be made out of a jacket potato.
salad is exceptional.
That's like a different thing. It's a different thing. Potato salad, like you're just changing it, man.
Potato salad's like the last thing left on like the shelf at Sainsbury's. If you have gone in there for lunch at 2:30, it's
Yeah,
like
well, you obviously
potato
don't
Potato
buy-
salads.
don't buy a
potato
plastic-
salad.
Yeah, if you like, that's a box of salmonella. Don't buy that. But like,
When you go
absolutely
to-
make a potato salad. It's great.
Yeah, when you go to a house, like a party or something, a family party, it's got a buffet. The first thing I'm angling for is potato salad. I'm straight
Yeah.
on that over a cocktail sausage. Like no two ways about it.
Potato salad's
Should we wrap
great.
up though, because we're just debating about potatoes here.
What potato do you
okay,
think
what was the
Tuchel
pod-
enjoys? Let us know in the comments below.
Well,
what
pretty
was
like
the
Pat
podcast on?
Kartoffeln, right?
What was the podcast on this week, Pat?
We actually talked a little bit about some of the bigger signings of the summer. So we did touch a little bit on Chelsea because we talked about Werner and Havertz. So we had a conversation about the biggest signings, how they've done, whether we are optimistic about their futures. Because this was kind of inspired by Joao Felix and like how he's really come on this season at Atletico Madrid. So yeah, it was a good one, and I think hopefully soon we're going to do how to rebuild Barcelona.
Woof. The annual rebuild of Barcelona.
Well, I think at this point it literally is rebuilding the city of Barcelona, which is which is
billion
now
in
just
debt,
like it's just a hole in the ground with people like scratching in the dirt.
Yeah. All right, then, let's wrap it up there. Yeah, that's another episode of Sunday Vibes in the can. Thanks very much for watching, everybody at home. We'll see you later. Bye.